Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Northwestern Prevention Collaborative's Overdose Awareness Vigil. I am your host, Robbie Seal. I'm the Vice President of the Warren Coalition, and it is my honor to be here this evening. For the 12-month period ending January 2023, there were more than 109,000 overdose deaths in the United States. It is estimated that 70% of these deaths were the result of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times more powerful than morphine. Just a few grains have the potential to kill. Choosing not to use drugs is the only way to guarantee you will not experience an overdose. But for those who have an opioid use disorder, that choice has been removed. The drug has changed their brain, convincing it that it needs the drug to survive. Withdrawal symptoms are very excruciating. Many of you already know this. Many of you already in recovery and could speak to this better than I. Thankfully, recovery is possible with medication and support from loved ones. For those here who have not yet entered recovery or who have family members or friends with an opioid use disorder, I invite you to visit some of the resources and organizations here this evening. You will find resources for medication-assisted recovery, which greatly improves the likelihood of long-term recovery. There is a rapid revive training over at the Northwestern Community Services Board table. I'm supposed to acknowledge Corey and Shannon waving. Everybody wave Corey and Shannon. I'm just a narrator, but I had a good script writer, our own very own Warren Coalition, Celeste Brooks. Celeste, where are you at? Thank you for the script. All right, continue. So there at the Northwestern Community Services table, this is where you, they have Narcan on hand, and of course we know Narcan can save a life. These are just a few of the many resources available this evening. Of course, the biggest reason we are gathered here is to remember the people we have lost to overdoses. There is a tribute board where you can post a photo of a loved one who has died of an overdose. If you do not have a photo, you can instead write their name, a note, or a favorite memory on the stationery provided and attach it to the board. Prior to the candlelight vigil tonight, we invite you to go to the table located near the double doors, where you see the peach tablecloth, and pick up a candle. You are welcome to write your loved one's name on the wax catcher, or decorate it in another manner if you would like to do so. The resources here will remain set until 8 o'clock this evening. So in about 15 minutes, we will introduce our first speaker of the evening. Until then, please continue visiting our resource tables. Thank you. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce and read a proclamation that was introduced and enacted by our Front Royal Town Council. This was approved on August 28, 2023. And it reads, Proclamation, International Overdose Awareness Day, 31st August. Whereas the people of Warren County and Front Royal, Virginia have been impacted by the opioid epidemic and the influx of fentanyl into our community, and whereas International Overdose Awareness Day is a global event held on the 31st of August each year that aims to raise awareness of overdose and reduce the stigma of a drug-related death, and whereas we acknowledge the grief felt by the families and friends remembering those who have died or had a permanent injury resulting from a drug overdose, and whereas International Overdose Awareness Day is one opportunity to remember community residents, friends, and family that have been lost to overdose death and promote strategies that can prevent future overdose deaths. And whereas hope can be found through community education and the support of people with substance use disorders and their families. And whereas Northwestern Preventive Collaboration and Warren Coalition invite all Warren County residents to participate in an International Overdose Awareness Day Vigil on August 31st, 2023. Now, therefore, the Front Royal Town Council does hereby proclaim August 31st, 2023 as International Overdose Awareness Day and call upon our residents to observe these occasions and participate in events or programs that support this year's observance. This was approved by our Mayor, Lori A. Copper, who's seated with us today. Also, Vice Mayor is here also, Wayne Sealock. Thank you so much, our town council members, for this proclamation. Well thought of and well recognized for this special day. Thank you. So once again, I think it's in my name more than once, but I'm Robbie Seal, Vice President of the Warren Coalition. I'm your host for this evening. This evening event is brought to you by Northwestern Preventive Collaborative, a cooperative partnership between Warren Coalition, Northwestern Community Services Board, Page Alliance for Community Action, Family Youth Initiative, and Northern Shenandoah Valley Substance Abuse Coalition. Now that's a mouthful, I'm telling you, but what a great group of organizations for a great partnership, absolutely. We would also like to thank our sponsor, the Women of the Moose, for initiating and financially supporting this event. And thank you to the Moose Lodge for allowing us to host this evening. All right, and our first speaker this evening is Chief Wayne Sager. Born and raised in the Shenandoah Valley, Chief Sager has served the town of Strasburg for nearly 17 years, 5 years which have been as their Chief of Police. He serves as the chair of the Family Youth Initiative for Shenandoah County, the Skyline Regional Criminal Justice Academy, and the Northwest Virginia Regional Drug and Gang Task Force. He is an executive committee member of the Northern Shenandoah Valley Substance Abuse Coalition, the Strasburg Rotary, and an active member of the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police, serving as committee member for both the Valor Awards and Professional Executive Leadership School. Chief Sager is a husband, a father of 3, an avid outdoorsman, and enjoys coaching his children's Little League sports. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Chief Sager.
Let me hold you. You can hold it. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow community members. I stand before you today with a heavy heart to address a topic that demands our urgent attention: overdose awareness. This is not just another speech. It's a call to action, a plea to come together as society to combat the devastating impact of drug overdoses. Overdoses are not limited to a particular age, race, or social class. They affect all people from all walks of life and can happen to anyone, directly or indirectly. The loss of a loved one due to an overdose is a pain that no family should endure. We must unite to end the stigma surrounding addiction and embrace empathy, understanding, and support for those who are struggling. As a law enforcement officer, we still have our job duties and responsibilities. However, there is a balance between law enforcement and recovery that we are working every day to navigate in the healthiest way possible. It is critical to recognize substance use disorders are a complex health issue. It is not the lack of willpower or moral strength. Substance use disorders are diseases that require treatment, compassion, and comprehensive support. The statistics surrounding drug overdoses are deeply concerning. Every day, lives are lost, families are shattered, and communities are left grieving. Behind each statistic is a human being, someone with dreams, aspirations, and potential. These lives cut short leave a void that can never be filled. The impact of drug overdoses extends beyond the individual to their loved ones, friends, and colleagues. The pain of loss ripples throughout our community and affects all, including law enforcement and all first responders. Overdose is not just about acknowledging the issue. It's about taking action to prevent future tragedies. Our vision needs to extend not just into tomorrow, but we need to be looking 3, 4, 5 years down the road. What will be next? How can we help our children? How can we, law enforcement, be a better partner and servant? We need to open lines of communication about substance use disorders and mental health. Break down the barriers that hinder people from receiving help and services. Education is a powerful tool in preventing overdoses. By spreading awareness about the signs of substance use disorders and the risk associated with drug use, we empower individuals to make informed decisions. Equally important is providing access to resources and treatment for those struggling with substance use disorders. We must invest in rehabilitation programs, mental health services, and harm reduction strategies. All of these community stakeholders and resources have came together recently in the creation of drug courts for both Warren and Shenandoah County. Today, I was honored to attend the very first drug court docket for Shenandoah County, showing law enforcement's support for these individuals. People with substance use disorders need care, not judgment. Compassion can be the catalyst for their journey towards recovery. As a community, we have a collective responsibility. Say that again. As a community, we have a collective responsibility to support those who are on the path to recovery. Encouragement, understanding, and non-judgmental attitude can make all the difference. We must create an environment where people feel safe to seek help without fear of stigma or discrimination. In conclusion, overdose awareness is not just once a year event, but it's an ongoing call to action. Let us join hands to break the stigma surrounding substance abuse disorders, increase education and access to treatment, advocate for policies that prioritize the well-being of our community. Together, we can save lives. We can create a society where every individual struggling with substance use disorders are offered hope and support. Today, I'd like to leave you with just those 3 words. These 3 words I'd like for you to remember and take back into your community. Keep the hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Sager, for sharing your insight with us tonight. Our next speaker is Lisa Cochran, a peer recovery support specialist with Northwestern Community Service Board. Lisa has sustained recovery from long-term substance use disorder. She was introduced to opiates at the age of 13 after a routine surgery that ultimately led to a 20-year battle with drug and alcohol addiction. Her lived experience includes jails, hospitals, countless treatment centers, detoxes, and several near-fatal overdoses. A few short years ago, she lost her beautiful daughter, Skylar Ann, to overdose at the age of 18. Today, Lisa tries to help others who are where she once was, and she tries to create a legacy of love and giving back for her daughter, Skylar, who she says saved her life. Ladies and gentlemen, the courageous Lisa Cochran.
Hi guys, thank you. Thank you for everyone who put this on. This is, I'm still a little bit overwhelmed when I'm in a room full of officers. So I spent the majority of my adult life on the run from you. So I still get a little nervous. This makes me feel really good. You know, a little bit of duplicity here. Not only did I spend most of my life as an addict, I also lost my daughter to addiction. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, which will then, lead into a little bit of my daughter's story. I'm going to try not to cry. I really don't want to cry. I get to do this once a week. I go into the behavioral unit at the hospital. It's a little bit different because I'm speaking to people at their lowest point, and I can relate to that because I spent a long time there. I don't know if there's anybody in here with addiction experience. So we spent a lot of time in a very hopeless place. For me, I spent about 15 to 17 years there. And I say hopeless. I don't know if you understand that kind of hopelessness. It's the kind of hopelessness where you no longer make plans or dreams because there's no point. It's a setup for disappointment when you hope, when you have dreams, because none of them come true. And I don't have to explain that when I go into the hospital or when I'm talking to other drug addicts, because they know. It's a universal feeling. So to be up here right now, I thought I was going to die that way. I thought I was going to die with that feeling. So I'm here to tell you that recovery is possible. It does happen. For me, it started with a little spark of hope. I don't need to tell, especially not the officers, I don't need to tell you all the dirty parts of my addiction. I spent about 15 years smoking heavy crack. That was my love, until it no longer kept the pain away. I was incarcerated when I lost my daughter. So you can imagine the guilt, the shame that I felt. I love my kids. When you're addicted to drugs, you don't get to put your kids first. I hate it when I hear people say, oh, they don't care about their kids, they care about drugs more. No. Drugs don't let you care about anything more than it. I love my kids. I still, fortunately, have a son. He loves me, he forgives me. I tried my best to be a good mom. But I was a better drug addict. And drugs were always first. So my daughter was a clone of me, from her appearance to her attitude. God bless her. She was a mini me. She suffered from mental health conditions, just like I did. I always felt different than, less than. I always struggled with depression. When I was about 13, I had surgery. And back then, they didn't know a whole lot about opiates like we do now. And they left me on them for 3, 4, 5 months. Well, they shouldn't have done that. They kind of messed my brain up. So later in life, when I did regular drugs with my friends who stopped at the end of the night, went home, I never understood why I couldn't do that. Well, it's probably because I spent 4 or 5 months in my adolescence on an opiate I should have never been on. I really think that created a lot of damage to my brain. So when I did recreational drugs in high school, it was like coming home. It filled that hole that I had, from my mental health conditions and also from the surgery I had. Of course I wasn't aware of any of this at the time. I just knew that I did not feel okay unless I was on a substance. And then I felt okay. So, fast forward a little bit. when my daughter started going through this, there aren't a lot of resources to help your 15, 16-year-old child when they don't want to get help. There just isn't. And then especially when she turned 18, there's really nothing that you can do for a loved one that doesn't want help, unless you commit them for 3 days if you can. But what does that do? So she was struggling for the last couple years of her life, and of course was doing the same things that I was doing, trying to fill herself up with various substances. None of them working, but yet making her worse with each one that she did. I was in jail. The officers came to get me, and anyone who's been incarcerated before, they only take you to intake when you're getting new charges or when someone's died. I knew I didn't have any new charges. I was about to get out. I had 5 weeks left on my bid. The whole time I was in there, she was struggling. Hold on, Skylar, I'm almost home. They took me down to intake. They said, you need to call your sister and it's an emergency. Well, I don't have a sister. So I knew someone had died, I just didn't know who. The phone number was my mom's. I knew immediately when I saw the phone number that my daughter was gone. So I called my mom, who's crying so hard I can't even understand what she's saying. I sent my son over to her house to be with her. Jail is not really a place that you can show emotion or weakness, so I don't even think I cried till I got out. But he walked me down the hall, kept asking me if I needed a counselor. Of course I said no, because you don't want to go anywhere they want to take you. Went back to my cell. They let me out for the funeral. I got to pick her clothes, and I went right back in for 4.5 more weeks. I had grand plans of staying clean. That did not happen. I think it was about 2.5 hours. I was back to it. And I spent the next year actively trying to kill myself. I overdosed more times in that last year than my whole drug career. I had so much pain, as you can imagine. I just didn't care. So what ultimately ended that was I got locked up again, and they kept me in there this time for a few months. I've been to jail so many times, that was nothing to me. I've been to so many treatment centers. When they offered that to me after about 6 or 7 months, I figured why not? It's better than jail. So I went, and what was going to help this time? I don't know, nothing, probably, because I was hopeless at this point. Everybody had given up on me. I believe my daughter saved my life. It was going to be me or her, and that's something I believe to my core. What she did for me was I could no longer continue to be that person. After losing her. And anyone who's a parent in here knows you can't tell me it's not my fault. You can't. But at least a little bit, right? It's my daughter. You're supposed to protect and nurture your children, cause them no harm, and I did. I wasn't getting high with her. I didn't do drugs in front of her, but I was a drug addict. She knew it. Drugs were always first. So I didn't put her first. I didn't care for her and nurture her the way I should have, the way I would have, had it not been for my addiction. So I was full of guilt and shame, as I should have been. And I just wanted to get back to the streets so I could numb that pain. And if I felt hopeless before, I really felt hopeless now. I had this counselor, bless her heart, who every day I would go into that office and she'd say the same thing to me. It's not your fault. You gotta let it go. About a couple weeks into this treatment stay, she finally said to me, and I would get mad at her. Yes, it is. Like, you know, I don't even want to talk to you if you're going to tell me it's not my fault. Finally, she said, okay, so what if it is a little bit your fault? Does it matter? Well, not really. What matters is, what are you going to do now? What can you do? Are you gonna let that be your daughter's legacy? That her mom was a drug addict, that she died of an overdose, the end, and I couldn't let that be her legacy. And that's when it clicked for me. My brother said the same thing to me at our funeral, when I was boo-hooing on his shoulder. He knew what I was going through. He said almost the same thing to me, and it didn't really click then, because I was probably high. But I can't let her death be in vain. I have to do something different. I have to help people because she lost her life. And, you know, I'm the only person still clean out of 32 women that went through the rehab with me. And I believe that's her. You know, I have something pushing me that other people don't. And for that, I'm grateful. Would I give it all back to have her here? Absolutely, yes. But I can't. So I do have that battery pack on me that I don't fantasize about relapsing. I don't fantasize about getting high anymore. I just don't, because that pain is so great. Of losing my daughter, and how could I do that? How could I go back to that and not give her a legacy that she deserves? So I don't even know how I found out about peer support or Northwestern. I think I kind of just fell into it. I was always that drug addict that wanted to get you high and then help you with your problems. So of course, that didn't ever go well. But I found out about, I think maybe it was a probation officer that told me about peer support. I can't really remember. But I latched onto that. You know, I did the training, I got certified, and it's like I found my calling. Because it makes me feel so good to help people, to inspire hope in people that are hopeless. So it's almost like getting high. It's a high. If I can inspire one person, because I know that feeling of hopelessness. I know it. I lived it. You know, it's still in there. So if I can do that, just one person every day, then I've done something and I've made a difference. And her death wasn't in vain. I got through all that without crying. I have a couple poems. We're going to see if I can get through those. This first one, I guess they're self-explanatory. I'm not quite sure yet if I'm going to read them both, because I don't know if we'll be able to get through them. But, so this is about a mother who's lost a child to overdose. So, I cried for you on the day that you were born. As the tears streamed down my face when your dad cut the cord. I cried for you as I watched you sleep, wondering how is this baby so perfect? How did you come for me? I cried for you when you got your first tooth and I knew your jaw hurt and I didn't know what to do. I cried for you when you fell and you scraped your knee, because it was the first time I ever saw you bleed. I cried for you when your first love said they wanted a break, and I just wanted to hold you because I knew heartache. I cried for you when you came to dinner high, and the baby I once knew seemed empty inside. I cried for you when you asked for money, and when I told you no, you said that you don't love me. I cried for you when I begged you to stop, saying I want my baby back so I can just be your mom. I cried for you when I got that call, saying we're sorry, ma'am, but your baby is gone. I cried for you laying in the fetal position, screaming out your name and cursing your addiction. I cried for you when I kissed your blue face, thinking if I had done something different, it would not be this way. I cried for you when I chose your funeral clothes and contemplated suicide so you wouldn't feel alone. I cried for you, remembering when you first looked at me, remembering the smell of your hair and the way that it curled. I cried for you, wishing I could go back in time, blaming myself because you got high. I will cry for you for the rest of my days, because the end of your life is my lifetime of pain. I think if only I could go back, if only I could fix this. I cry over my baby that I lost to addiction. I'm gonna read the other one for you, because I didn't actually cry, I just kind of almost cried. This one is called Until. Until the phone rings and you fall to the ground, stricken with an unthinkable pain. Until the flashbacks of the baby you once held in your arms rewind on a loop in your mind on replay. Until grief heavier than a 10,000-pound brick is planted on top of your chest, you will not understand what it means to hear we are sorry, we tried our best. Until you lose rest and you cannot eat at all, until nothing in life makes sense, until you sob making deals with God, until He puts every ounce of your faith to the test, until you pick out the last outfit your once tiny baby will wear. Forever, you will not understand. That's all I got. Thank you so much for listening and letting me speak.
Listen, this is not script, but may I give you a hug on that? Yeah, I just want to let you know, and I think I can speak for all the uniformed officers you see in this room and elsewhere, that this uniform means more than what you stated or being nervous about. There's a lot of care and a lot of support for people like you that have that loss and that addiction, substance abuse issue. We'll always be there for you. Law enforcement as a whole will always be there for you and others like you. Again, another round of applause for that testimony. So thank you, Lisa, for your honesty and courage in sharing your story. Ladies and gentlemen, our final speaker this evening is John Winslow. With over 47 years of continuous recovery, John is the founder of International Recovery Day, Inc. He is the chairman of the 23 West Club in Luray. I'm familiar with Luray. I live in Luray, which provides 64 mutual support meetings monthly. As a longtime recovery advocate, John has provided prevention, treatment, and recovery-related presentations and trainings on regional, statewide, and national levels. It is my pleasure to bring to the podium John Winslow.
Really appreciate the invitation to come out and be a part of this vigil this evening. Lisa, thanks for your courage and sharing. Chief, thanks for your words and a message of support from law enforcement. How important that is for us that are impacted by addiction. For those individuals and the family members, and it just. I do a lot of, I'm very engaged with social media, and Facebook in particular. And I was just mindful, particularly with Lisa's share and just opening up her heart about her loss, about her guilt, sharing her message of recovery. One of the former, it was known as drug czar out of the White House, Michael Botticelli was the first person in recovery that held that title. And one of the things that Michael was frequently say is that it's hard to hate somebody up close. And that's what we're doing tonight, is we're putting a face and a voice to addiction and to recovery, and the message that that it's not about bad people getting good, it's about sick people getting well. And I'm one of those fortunate ones, blessed to have found recovery and been able to sustain my recovery over time. I've known countless other folks that have struggled to get into the rooms of recovery and have relapsed and struggled again and relapsed, as Lisa was sharing in her story. And people that know better, know worse than I, and for whatever reason they were not successful in their efforts. And so I recognize that I'm one of those blessed ones. But with my involvement with Facebook and supporting recovery efforts in various ways, I am still amazed at so much of the misunderstanding of what addiction is, and the prejudice that's out there, the stigma that's out there, the hate that's out there, that we in recovery and the family members that are experiencing a loved one of addiction, we know the struggles that someone with addiction has, and until you have been in their shoes, it's just so hard to get it. It's hard enough for me to get it. And what addiction and the nature of addiction and how it hijacks our brain, and we want our lives to be different. I can remember my daughter crying for daddy. I would rush her through dinner. I would get her into her pajamas. I don't know if there was time for a bath or not. I would put her in bed. And as I was walking out to my car and reaching for the door handle, I could hear Sherry up in the bedroom crying for daddy to read her asleep. Read her a story to get her asleep. And daddy had somewhere to go. And I knew how wrong that was, and yet I got in the car and I drove off. And so it's events like this that can help put a face and a voice to addiction and help folks to understand, once again, it's not about bad people getting good, it's about sick people getting well. In working on gathering my thoughts in coming here this evening, I was mindful of two concepts. One of my greatest heroes is Mohandas Mahatma Gandhi. And, you know, Gandhi's been known for some wonderful quotations, you know, be the change, you know, that you'd like to see in the world. One of his other quotations that has really moved me in my own personal way is, whatever you do will be insignificant, but it's very important that you do it. And so, you know, I asked myself, you know, in thinking about coming here this evening, you know, what do I really have to offer? How can I really help those that are dealing with the loss of a loved one through overdose, whether it was intentional overdose, accidental overdose, whether it was an unsuccessful overdose, however that might happen for somebody. And so one of the things that I learned through my recovery experience is to simply suit up and show up. That I'm only responsible for the footwork. I've done what I could to contemplate, to meditate, to think about, you know, putting some thoughts together to be able to share with you this evening that would help. But I'm only responsible for the footwork. I'm not responsible for the results, the outcome. And so if anything that I say tonight does not happen to move anybody and to, you know, move the needle to any degree, that's okay. I'm doing what I need to do. And beyond that, I can just let go and let God, let my higher power. The other concept that I'm mindful of is the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. And so I know that people attending this event this evening can be in a very raw place. You know, whether this is something that occurred, you know, an overdose loss occurred years ago, whereas I see on the board here something a very recent loss. That people can still be very raw, regardless of the time. You know, it's in my own recovery journey and learning about dealing with loss. You know, I came to understand that there's no timeline for it. It's not like, well, hey man, it's been 6 months, you know, get on with it. You know, it takes whatever it takes. It takes as long as it takes it. If it takes a lifetime, it takes a lifetime. There's no right or wrong to it. There's no right or wrong to how you feel about it. If you're sitting there and you're just enraged, that's okay. If you're in just feeling great despair, that's okay. If you're feeling relieved for whatever reason, that's okay. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay to feel whatever you feel. And so I hope that my words and what I share today at the least cause no harm to anybody. I'm looking to share my experience, strength, and hope, and my thoughts, and they're my thoughts only. And so, as I learned in recovery, early recovery, they said, take what you can, and leave the rest. And so, there's already been a wealth of significant sharing that has touched me and been impactful for me. You know, and has brought back some memories of some deep loss experiences that I had, like the night that my daughter Sherry called me and was crying hysterically and shared with me that her daughter, she had just found out that her daughter had died, my granddaughter Sierra. And Sierra didn't die directly from addiction. It was not an overdose. But it was indirectly related to addiction, and there's multi-generational addiction in my family. And this was Sierra died. She was 17 years old, a nursing student, and she died 15 years ago. But I still, when I hear Lisa share about, you know, her phone call, it triggered for my phone call. And the feelings that I had, and the hopelessness that I felt, the powerlessness that I felt. So, you know, I've had, as with many of you sitting here today, You know, I've experienced plenty of loss through overdose, through suicide, through addiction, through mental health issues, and oftentimes a combination of all the above. At times, you know, it started when I was 17 years old. My sister, older sister Carol, 19 years old, she was killed by a drunk driver. 19 years old, on the way down to Florida. Spring break. Along with my sister being killed in that car accident, her fiance was killed. Her best friend was also killed. The guy that was drunk driving the other way, taking a birthday present to his child and hit my sister's car head on, he was killed also. And I was involved. I went with my dad. We flew down to Atlanta, Georgia. It's on the outskirts of Atlanta, and I flew down there with my father, and we retrieved the personal possessions. And so I was in the car, and I saw the sights, and I smelled the smells, and I swore to myself I would never drink and drive again. And that promise lasted maybe 2 or 3 months, and I drove under the influence countless times. At any of those times, I could have taken somebody else's life. And I was just, all I was thinking about was me. I was already caught up in my addiction, 17 years old. I had no idea that I was an alcoholic at the time. For me, it was my third treatment experience. My first treatment experience was 2 months in a psychiatric unit, a VA hospital. Too young to be an alcoholic. Had too good of upbringing to be an alcoholic. I didn't drink every day. I didn't drug every day. I didn't drink in the morning. I didn't use in the morning. My drug of choice was alcohol. It wasn't those other drugs. Well, it was, but second treatment experience. Didn't want to hear it. Again, too young. I had a counselor that was in recovery who was an AA member, and he used to say, "We can do together what none of us can do alone." And I said under my breath, "That's bullshit. I don't need you people. I don't need this group therapy. I don't need you. I don't need a 12-step program." And I tried for the next year to try to not be what they were suggesting that I was, and ended up with a head-on collision. I had just turned 26 years old, and as I came to, I didn't wake up, but as I came to the next day, I had what I call my moment of truth. And it wasn't because the other guy's headlights blinded me. It wasn't because of poor weather conditions. You know, it wasn't any of those things. It was the reason that that accident occurred was because I had been using alcohol and other substances all night long, and I could no longer deny the fact that I had a significant problem. Fortunately, got into a treatment program that gave me an excellent education about addiction and about the recovery process, and I haven't found it necessary to use alcohol or other drugs, you know, from that time forward. And so I ended up, you know, as it happened, I went back to school. I only had a high school education at the time. I went back to school and I got my master's degree, and I got into the addictions field. And rather than being part of the problem, I was able to become part of the solution now, finally. And through my journey of working with others and helping others learn to deal in recovery with their feelings, I was able to draw from my own personal experience to help others that had lost loved ones. And that's what I hope to be able to help with today and this evening. One of the things that I have a sponsor in my recovery. One of the things that a couple things that my sponsors say. One is that God doesn't have grandchildren. And so what he means by that is my relationship with my higher power is my deal, and my loved ones, my daughters, others, their relationship with their higher power, that's their deal. And it doesn't work for me to be the middleman. I can't save anybody else. I can't even keep myself in recovery by myself. I need help. And I certainly can't get anybody else into recovery. That's one of the things that I had learned. I'd also learned and believe, and my sponsor has frequently said this, is that God loves us all equally. He doesn't love me, a person with many years, decades of recovery, doesn't love me any more than he does the person that is out there on the street corners this evening looking to cop some dope. My personal belief that we're all children of God. And as they told me early in my recovery, that God doesn't make junk. So, with people dealing with, as I was saying, that people could be feeling all kinds of feelings in here this evening, and there's no right or wrong to that. If you're feeling whatever you're feeling. But I was mindful as I was putting my thoughts together about a story, and a number of you have probably heard this story, the story of the two wolves. So an old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. And he says, "A fight is going on inside of me," he said to the boy. "It's a terrible fight, and it's between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego." He continued, "The other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside of you," he told the boy, "and inside every other person also." So the grandson thought about it for a minute, and then he asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old Cherokee simply replied, "The one you feed." And so the reason that I share that story tonight is that, again, you could be really caught up in the grips of whether it's anger, rage, despair, hopelessness. We talked about that earlier, the importance of hope. And so I call on you and I urge you that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. But I encourage you to consider and think about that story and feed that wolf that offers hope in your heart, love in your heart, forgiveness in your heart. A friend of mine and I, years ago, as I was an addictions counselor for a lot of years, and we did some trainings throughout some of the states in Maryland, Delaware, etc., New Jersey, and the trainings in particular were on spirituality and addiction, and the correlation, the relationship between the two. One of the things that we shared with our participants in this training was about the Tibetan Buddhists and the beautiful mandalas that they create. Some of you may be familiar with them. They're just gorgeous, and they can take days and days and days, these Buddhist monks with these beautifully colored sands, and they will create these mandalas of very intricate designs, taking days, with just, infinite dexterity, and at the end of it, they pray and they meditate, and then they whisk it all away, this beautiful creation. And it's a reflection of the impermanence of life. As I learned in recovery, that concept that this too shall pass, that everything is temporary. And so what you're feeling now, it's temporary, whether it's you're feeling at peace or some serenity or, again, rage. Just hang in there. This too shall pass. Hope is available through recovery. I want to leave you with just a couple thoughts. Actually, I want to close with this. I want to close with the serenity prayer and offer it to you. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. May peace be with you.
Thank you, John, for your words of hope and encouragement. We will now conduct our candlelight vigil. So if you have not already picked up a candle, there will be someone at the table. That's Celeste. If you have not picked up candles, she will be handing them out. We're actually going to we did plan on doing it outside. However, that's changed because I think it's a little windy out there. So we're going to actually conduct our candlelight vigil indoors. So what we'll end up doing is having everybody with their candle pretty much located where you want to on the hardwood floor, not necessarily on the carpet. We don't want to get candle wax on the carpet. But anyway, please head to get your candle, and right now we are looking for, I guess, our first song of the evening.